Shattered constellations, Olivia Winters adjusted her emerald cocktail dress, feeling out of place among the glittering crowd at the Pacific Conservation Gala. As the head marine biologist at Horizon Marine Sanctuary, she belonged in wetsuit and flippers, not designer heels. But tonight's event represented her best chance at securing crucial funding for her endangered coral restoration project. Just smile, nod, and don't mention decomposition rates to potential donors, her assistant had advised with a smirk. Olivia nursed her sparkling water at the edge of the ballroom. The chandeliers of San Francisco's Oceanic Hotel cast prismatic reflections across the marble floor, reminiscent of sunlight filtering through water. She scanned the crowd of tech moguls and venture capitalists who'd paid $5,000 a plate to appear environmentally conscious. Dr. Winters, a silver-haired woman, approached. "I'm Josephine Merrick from the Harbor Foundation. Your proposal on coral rehabilitation is fascinating." Olivia's professional demeanor activated instantly. The technique uses bioengineered substrate that accelerates growth by nearly 60%. We've had remarkable success in controlled environments, but we need expanded facilities to... She stopped mid-sentence as the crowd parted, revealing a tall figure across the room. The champagne flute in her hand nearly slipped from her fingers. James Harrison, founder and CEO of Nebula Technologies, the man who had once promised her the stars, then left her behind to chase them. 6 years hadn't changed him much. Perhaps a touch of silver at his temples, a more refined posture. His custom-tailored suit fit him perfectly, but it was his laugh, that rare, genuine sound, that sent a jolt through her. She'd once been the cause of that laugh. "Are you all right, Dr. Winters?" Josephine asked, following her gaze. "Fine," Olivia managed. "Just recognize someone." James Harrison. "He's one of tonight's major donors. Brilliant mind. They say he works 20-hour days. Built Nebula from nothing." Not nothing, Olivia thought. From the remnants of our shared dreams. Before she could excuse herself, Josephine was waving him over. Panic fluttered in Olivia's chest. 6 years of carefully constructed emotional barriers suddenly felt as fragile as a sandcastle at high tide. "James, come meet Dr. Olivia Winters. Her coral restoration work is revolutionary." His confident stride faltered when he spotted her. Recognition, shock, and something unreadable flashed across his face. "Olivia." He breathed her name like a long-forgotten prayer. "James." She managed a professional nod despite her thundering heart. Josephine glanced between them. "You know each other?" "We were," James began, "acquainted." "Years ago," Olivia finished coldly. An awkward silence descended, disrupted only when a waiter passed with champagne. James declined, his eyes never leaving Olivia's face. "Your work sounds fascinating," he finally said, his voice carefully controlled. "Nebula has been developing biodegradable smart sensors. They might be useful for monitoring ocean conditions around your coral beds." "How convenient," Olivia replied, her tone deliberately neutral. "Though I recall you once thought marine biology was wasting my potential on fish." James winced. "I was young and stupid, and now you're older and..." She let the question hang. "Still learning," he answered quietly. Something in his humility caught her off guard. The James, she remembered, would have defended himself, justified his choices. Before she could respond, the event coordinator announced dinner. Josephine excused herself, leaving them momentarily alone in the crowd. "It's good to see you, Liv," he said softly, using her old nickname. "Dr. Winters," she corrected. "And this is a professional event, Mr. Harrison. Let's keep it that way." As she turned to find her table, his voice followed her. "What if I don't want to?" Olivia froze but didn't look back. 6 years of building her career, her reputation, her life without him. 6 years of convincing herself that what they had was just youthful infatuation. 6 years wasn't enough to forget the way he'd chosen his ambitions over their future. She squared her shoulders and continued walking, even as she felt his gaze tracking her movement across the room like a distant lighthouse beam piercing through fog. Tides of regret. The week following the gala passed in a blur for Olivia. 3 grant proposals, a dive expedition to monitor the experimental coral beds, and an emergency rescue of a stranded sea lion kept her mercifully distracted. But each night, alone in her modest beachside cottage, James's voice echoed in her mind, "What if I don't want to?" On Friday afternoon, Olivia was knee-deep in data analysis when her lab assistant, Tessa, knocked on her office door. "There's a delivery for you," Tessa announced, failing to hide her curiosity. In the reception area sat an elegant arrangement of sea lavender and beach grass. Not traditional flowers, but coastal plants that belonged in the ecosystem Olivia fought to protect. The card simply read, "Some things change. Some remain constant. Coffee? Gee, who sends native plants instead of roses?" Tessa wondered aloud. "Someone who was paying attention," Olivia murmured, touching the delicate purple blooms. She texted a polite decline, citing work commitments. His response came immediately. "I'll wait. Always have time for what matters now." That evening, leaving the lab after everyone had gone, Olivia found James sitting on the seawall outside, watching the sunset paint the Pacific in shades of amber and rose. No suit today, just jeans and a simple sweater that reminded her of the graduate student she'd fallen for before Nebula, before the ambition, before everything fell apart. "Stalking is generally frowned upon," she said, approaching cautiously. James smiled, the fading sunlight catching the gold flecks in his eyes. "Consider it persistence. Your research deserves support. And that's why you're here? Professional interest?" "No," he admitted. "But I thought you might accept that reason." They walked along the shore in silence, shoes in hand, the cool water occasionally washing over their feet. The familiar rhythm felt like stepping into an old, beloved book opened to a dog-eared page. "Remember that night in Monterey?" James finally asked. "When we snuck onto the beach after hours to watch the bioluminescence?" Olivia nodded despite herself. "You said it looked like the ocean was full of stars, and you corrected me with a 15-minute lecture on dinoflagellates." A reluctant smile tugged at her lips. "Which you actually listened to." "I always listened, Liv, even when it seemed like I didn't." She stopped walking. "Not when it mattered. Not when I told you I couldn't keep being the only one invested in us while you built your empire." James stared out at the darkening horizon. "I thought I was building it for us. For our future. You never asked if that's what I wanted." "I know." He turned to her, vulnerability etching lines around his eyes she hadn't noticed before. "I convinced myself you'd understand eventually. That when Nebula succeeded, you'd see it was worth the sacrifice." "And was it?" she challenged. "Worth losing us?" Pain flashed across his face. "Nothing was worth that." A wave larger than the others surged around their calves, nearly throwing Olivia off balance. James steadied her, his hand warm against her elbow, and for a moment she allowed the contact. "What happened to us, James?" "The real reason," he exhaled slowly. "Fear. I was terrified of failing, at Nebula, at being the man you deserved. Every time you looked at me with such confidence, I felt this crushing pressure. What if I couldn't become everything you saw in me? So instead you pushed me away. I buried myself in work because it was controllable. Relationships aren't algorithms. They can't be debugged or optimized. And when you finally had enough," his voice cracked slightly, "I told myself it proved I was right to be afraid." The admission hung between them like sea mist, tangible yet impossible to grasp. "Do you know what I did the night you left?" he continued. "I worked until dawn, then walked to that coffee shop where we first met. Sat in our corner booth until closing." Olivia wrapped her arms around herself, fighting the tide of emotions threatening to pull her under. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because seeing you at the gala made me realize something. All these years I've been successful at everything except what actually matters. I built the company, made the fortune, changed the industry, and I've never been emptier." The moonlight silvered the waves, creating a luminous path across the water. In another life, another time, they might have followed it together. "I can't go back, James. I'm not the same person. I wouldn't want you to be. The woman you've become, accomplished, confident, still fighting for what she believes in, she's extraordinary." Olivia felt heat rise to her cheeks despite the cool evening air. "And you? Are you still the man who chose ambition over everything else? James looked at her directly, his expression stripped of the polished CEO veneer. I'm trying not to be. Every day. As they reached the point where their paths would diverge, her cottage to the north, his hotel to the south, James handed her a business card with his personal number scrawled on the back. Nebula is launching a new marine conservation initiative. No strings attached, I'll fund your research regardless. But I'd value your expertise, and maybe the chance to show you who I'm becoming. Olivia accepted the card, their fingers brushing momentarily. I can't promise anything. I'm not asking for promises, he said quietly. Just possibilities. She watched him walk away, his figure gradually dissolving into the coastal darkness. The card in her hand felt impossibly heavy for such a small thing, weighted with the past and questions about the future she wasn't ready to answer. Back in her cottage, Olivia placed the card beside the sea lavender arrangement on her windowsill. Outside, the tide was turning, water reclaiming land in its eternal cycle. Some forces, she knew, were impossible to resist forever. Shifting currents, the Horizon Marine Sanctuary's research vessel cut through morning fog, carrying Olivia and her team to the offshore monitoring station. 3 weeks had passed since her beach walk with James, and against her better judgment, she'd agreed to a professional collaboration. Nebula's biodegradable sensors could revolutionize her data collection. A pragmatic decision, she told herself repeatedly. Dr. Winters? The boat captain gestured ahead. Someone's already at the platform. A sleek Zodiac was moored alongside their research buoy. As they approached, Olivia spotted a familiar figure examining the monitoring equipment. That's not possible, she muttered. He's supposed to be in Tokyo. But there stood James Harrison, CEO of a multi-billion-dollar tech corporation, dressed in standard diving gear rather than his usual bespoke suit, intently studying their coral growth chamber. Is that your tech benefactor? Asked Nolan, her graduate student assistant. I thought we'd just be getting the equipment, not the actual billionaire. Olivia adjusted her windbreaker. So did I. As their vessel docked, James straightened and offered a tentative wave. Sunlight caught the droplets of seawater on his face, momentarily transporting Olivia back to their university days when they'd spend weekends exploring tide pools and dreaming of changing the world. You're supposed to be in Tokyo, she called out as she boarded the platform. Delegated, he replied simply. This seemed more important. Nolan's eyes widened. You delegated an international corporate merger to install some sensors? James smiled. Good morning to you, too. And yes, my COO is handling Tokyo. She's better at it anyway. Something shifted in Olivia's understanding of him. The James she'd known before would never have surrendered control of such a high-profile negotiation. The morning proceeded with technical discussions as James demonstrated the sensor's capabilities. His genuine enthusiasm for the science surprised her. He asked thoughtful questions about coral reproduction and adaptation that revealed hours of independent research. By midday, as the team broke for lunch, Olivia found herself alone with James at the edge of the platform. Your team respects you immensely, he observed, watching Nolan and the others chatting on the boat. It's evident in how they look at you. They're brilliant scientists. We've built something special here. She hesitated. You seem different with your work, too. More balanced. James gazed across the endless blue horizon. Nebula nearly collapsed 2 years ago. Security breach. Stock plummeted. I worked 72 hours straight trying to save it. I didn't know, she said softly. Few people do. But on the 3rd night, I collapsed. Woke up in the hospital with my doctor telling me I was killing myself. His voice grew quiet. All I could think was that if I died that night, my legacy would be stock prices and product launches. Nothing real. Olivia remained silent, watching his profile against the ocean backdrop. That's when I started restructuring everything, the company, my priorities. He turned to face her. I kept thinking about what you always said about symbiosis, how the strongest ecosystems are built on interdependence, not dominance. The fact that he'd remembered her ecological theories from years ago caught her off guard. James, she began carefully, I appreciate what you're doing for the sanctuary, truly. But if you're helping us because you think it will somehow— I'm not, he interrupted gently. I'm helping because your work matters. Whether or not— He paused, choosing his words. Whatever happens between us. Before she could respond, Nolan called over, pointing excitedly at readings from one of the new sensors. They spent the afternoon immersed in data collection, Olivia deliberately keeping their interactions professional. As sunset approached and they prepared to return to shore, a message came through on their emergency channel. A fishing trawler had spotted a humpback whale entangled in abandoned netting directly in their vicinity. We need to respond, Olivia announced. Already gathering the rescue equipment. Visibility will be poor soon, the captain warned. It'll be dark within the hour. Then we work quickly, she replied, her decision made. To her surprise, James stepped forward. I've done entanglement training with the Pacific Marine Rescue Center. Let me help, Olivia hesitated, studying him. This wasn't the calculated risk-taking of a CEO. This was something else entirely. This isn't a photo op, James. I know, he said quietly. It's a whale that needs help. 20 minutes later, they located the distressed humpback. The massive creature rolled anxiously at the surface, its fluke bound by thick poly rope that cut into its flesh. Olivia coordinated from the Zodiac, while James and Nolan entered the water with cutting tools. Watching James work with careful, measured movements, communicating seamlessly with her team as if they'd trained together for years, Olivia felt something crystallize within her. The James she'd loved had always been there, beneath layers of ambition and fear. As darkness fell, they finally freed the whale. When James climbed back into the boat, exhausted but triumphant, their eyes met in the fading light. You didn't have to do that, she said softly, handing him a thermal blanket. Yes, I did. His voice held absolute certainty. Some things are non-negotiable. The journey back to shore was quiet, both physically and emotionally drained. As they unloaded equipment at the dock, James received an urgent call from his office. The Tokyo deal? Olivia guessed after he hung up. Yes. There's an issue I need to handle personally. He ran a hand through his salt-crusted hair. I need to fly out tonight. The old familiar disappointment began to surface, but before it could take hold, James continued. But I'm only staying for 48 hours, then coming back. If that's okay. You're the CEO, she said cautiously. Surely they need you there longer. They don't need me more than— He stopped himself. I've learned my limits. And my priorities. As he turned to go, Olivia surprised herself by calling after him. There's a community lecture at the aquarium Wednesday evening on reef conservation. If you're back by then— The smile that spread across his face held the same boyish wonder she remembered from their first dates. I'll be there. Wild horses, corporate crises, or international incidents couldn't keep me away. Watching his retreating figure, Olivia wrapped her arms around herself in the evening chill. The tide was shifting between them, carrying them into uncharted waters. For the first time in years, she wasn't fighting against the current. That night, as she updated the sanctuary's research logs, Olivia found herself writing, Today we saved a whale from entanglement. And perhaps something else was untangled, too. Eye of the Storm Wednesday arrived with unexpected fury. A late-season storm system barreled toward the California coast, bringing gale-force winds and towering waves. The Horizon Marine Sanctuary's emergency alert pinged Olivia's phone at 4:17 a.m. The containment structures are failing, Nolan reported breathlessly when she arrived at headquarters. Rain lashed against the windows as they huddled over the monitoring station's live feed. Wave intensity is exceeding our design parameters. If we lose the experimental coral beds, we won't, Olivia said firmly, though dread pooled in her stomach. 3 years of research, countless hours underwater nurturing fragile polyps back to viability. The last known samples of certain species, all threatened by nature's unpredictable might. The sanctuary's small team mobilized quickly, loading reinforcement materials onto their research vessel despite the harbor master's warnings about dangerous conditions. As they prepared to depart, a black SUV screeched to a halt at the dock. James emerged, drenched instantly by the driving rain. He wore practical weather gear and carried what appeared to be equipment cases. "You're supposed to be in Tokyo," Olivia shouted over the wind's howl. "I was," he replied, helping load the final supplies. "Got on the first flight out when I saw the storm projections?" "Crossing your research area," Nolan shot Olivia a meaningful glance that she pretended not to. "Notice! This is madness," the captain warned as they navigated through the harbor's protective breakwater into open water. "We've got a narrow window before conditions deteriorate further." The journey to the offshore platform was treacherous. Massive swells lifted the vessel, then dropped it sickening distances into troughs between waves. Olivia gripped the safety railing, knuckles white, while mentally calculating the irreplaceable value of what they might lose. Beside her, James pulled out his tablet, protected in a waterproof case. "I've been reviewing your structural designs," he shouted over the storm. "The primary vulnerability is here." He pointed to the northwest corner of the containment array. "If we reinforce this junction first, it should buy us time for the rest." Olivia stared at him. "You analyzed our engineering schematics on your flight?" "In between calls with Tokyo, yes," he admitted. "Old habits. Except this time, the obsessive focus is for something that actually matters." When they reached the platform, conditions were worse than anticipated. The research station swayed precariously, its moorings straining against the sea's power. Equipment designed to withstand normal oceanic conditions now creaked ominously. "We need to split up," Olivia directed, professional mode fully engaged. "Nolan, take Westfield and secure the eastern moorings. Captain, monitor conditions from the vessel." "James," she hesitated. "I'm with you," he said simply, already donning his dive gear. They descended into the turbulent waters, visibility reduced to mere feet. Even for experienced divers, the conditions were challenging. The reinforcement procedure required precise manipulation of support structures, while battling surging currents that threatened to slam them into the very equipment they were trying to protect. Working in seamless tandem, they managed to stabilize the critical northwest junction. Underwater, communication was limited to hand signals and anticipated movements. Olivia found herself marveling at how quickly they'd fallen into sync, as if the years of separation had been compressed into nothing in the face of immediate crisis. A sudden violent surge separated them briefly. When the water cleared, Olivia saw James gesturing urgently toward one of the primary supports. A section had begun to buckle under the strain. Without it, the entire western array, containing their most promising coral specimens, would collapse. The repair would require someone to position themselves in the direct path of the surging water. Dangerous, possibly foolhardy. Before she could signal a plan, James was already moving into position, bracing himself against the punishing current to hold the support steady while signaling for her to complete the reinforcement. The message in his eyes was clear: "I trust you. We do this together." 20 grueling minutes later, they surfaced, exhausted but successful. The critical structures were holding. As they climbed back aboard the research vessel, the team's relieved faces told them the immediate danger had passed. "That was either the bravest or stupidest thing I've ever seen," Nolan remarked, helping them remove their tanks. "Thin line between the two," James replied with a weary smile. As the storm began to abate, they returned to shore, the sanctuary battered but intact. The adrenaline that had carried them through the crisis ebbed, leaving bone-deep fatigue in its wake. In the sanctuary's lab, wrapped in thermal blankets with mugs of hot tea, they reviewed the data coming in from the newly reinforced sensors. "The containment integrity is holding at 94%, Olivia reported with relief. "We didn't lose a single specimen." The small team celebrated quietly, aware of how narrowly they'd averted disaster. As staff began departing to get much-needed rest, Olivia found herself alone with James in her office. "I'm sorry you missed your lecture," he said, nodding toward the clock. "It was well past the scheduled event time." "Considering the circumstances, I think the aquarium will forgive me," she replied. "But you flew across the Pacific Ocean, analyzed engineering schematics, dove into dangerous waters." She studied him with newfound clarity. "Why?" James met her gaze steadily. Because I meant what I said on the beach. Some things are non-negotiable now. Your board must be thrilled with your new priorities, she said, attempting lightness despite the emotion tightening her throat. Actually, they've adapted quite well to a CEO who delegates appropriately and doesn't burn out. He set down his mug. But I didn't come back for them. I came back for those coral beds because they're your life's work. And for you, because, he paused, vulnerability crossing his face, because even after 6 years, you're still the first person I think about when I wake up, and the last before I sleep. The confession hung in the air between them. Olivia found herself at a precipice more daunting than any ocean depth she'd explored. James, today was extraordinary, but one heroic gesture doesn't erase. It wasn't a gesture, he interrupted gently. It was a choice. The same choice I make every day now, and I'll keep making it, whether or not you can ever trust me again. He stood to leave, exhaustion evident in the slope of his shoulders. At the door, he turned back. For what it's worth, I'm proud of what you've built here. Not just the research, but the purpose. You always knew what mattered. As he stepped into the hallway, Olivia found herself following. James? He turned, hope and resignation warring in his expression. Stay, she said softly. The roads are still dangerous, and you need rest. The sanctuary has guest quarters for visiting researchers. Something flickered in his eyes, understanding that she was offering more than practical accommodation, but not presuming how much more. Thank you, he replied simply. That night, as the storm's remnants whistled around the sanctuary buildings, Olivia lay awake thinking of ocean currents and the invisible forces that move beneath the surface. How some separations, like continental drift, seem permanent and irreversible until you discover that even continents were once joined and may someday find their way back to each other again. In the room down the hall, she knew James was awake too. Between them flowed the unspoken understanding that what had happened today wasn't just about saving coral. It was about two people discovering that sometimes the most valuable things are worth fighting impossible odds to preserve. Navigating new waters. Morning brought calm seas and clear skies, nature's dramatic mood shift offering no hint of the previous day's fury. Olivia stood on the sanctuary's observation deck, watching sunrise paint the horizon in watercolor hues of amber and rose. The research station's sensors reported minimal damage, a miracle considering what they'd faced. Coffee? She turned to find James offering a steaming mug, his hair still damp from a shower, eyes reflecting the dawn light. Such a simple domestic gesture, yet it carried the weight of all their complicated history. Thank you. Their fingers brushed during the exchange, neither pulling away too quickly. I checked the monitoring systems, he said, leaning against the railing beside her. Your design held brilliantly. Most corporate infrastructure wouldn't have survived half of what your station endured. We built it to last, she replied. Nature doesn't give second chances very often. The double meaning hung between them as they sipped their coffee in companionable silence. Watching the ocean's surface glitter with possibilities, Olivia's phone buzzed. An incoming video call from Josephine Merrick of the Harbor Foundation. She answered, putting it on speaker. Dr. Winters, we've been watching the news. Is the sanctuary intact? Josephine's concerned face filled the screen. We managed to prevent major damage, Olivia confirmed. The experimental coral beds are secure. That's extraordinary, Josephine said, visibly relieved. But I'm afraid I have less positive news. The board met this morning about your expansion proposal. While they recognize its merit, the capital requirements... Olivia's heart sank. The expanded facility would have tripled their rehabilitation capacity, allowed for breakthrough research on coral resilience against warming waters. Without it, their impact would remain limited to a handful of species. I understand, she said professionally, though disappointment tightened her throat. Perhaps next funding cycle... Actually, James interjected, stepping into view, I'd like to discuss an alternative approach. Recognition dawned on Josephine's face. Mr. Harrison, I didn't realize you were involved with the sanctuary? Increasingly so, he replied, glancing briefly at Olivia. What if Nebula Technologies partnered directly with Horizon Sanctuary? Full expansion funding, plus our engineering expertise for enhanced facilities. Olivia stared at him, stunned. James, that's tens of millions. An investment in the future, he said firmly. With one condition, the sanctuary remains under Dr. Winter's complete scientific direction. Nebula provides resources and technological support, but all research priorities and conservation decisions stay with her team. After further discussion and promises of formal proposals, they ended the call. Olivia turned to James, conflicting emotions battling within her. You can't just solve problems by throwing money at them, she said, though without real anger. I'm not, he replied calmly. I'm allocating resources to the most qualified person I know to address a critical environmental challenge. That's just good business. Is that what I am? A business decision? His expression softened. You know better. Later that morning, they walked the shoreline trail behind the sanctuary, discussing possibilities for the expanded facilities. The professional conversation gradually gave way to more personal waters. The Tokyo merger, Olivia ventured. What happened with it? James smiled ruefully. Completed successfully despite my early departure. My team is extraordinarily capable when I let them be. That must be difficult for you. Letting go of control. Terrifying, he admitted, but necessary. I've learned that success means nothing if you're not present for your own life. He stopped walking, turning to face her directly. Liv, before we go any further with either the sanctuary partnership or whatever might be happening between us, there's something you should know. Her pulse quickened at his serious tone. What is it? I'm stepping down as CEO of Nebula. The revelation struck her like an unexpected wave. What? But it's your company, your creation, and it will continue to thrive under Abigail Thorne's leadership. She's been ready for years while I've been holding on too tightly. He gazed out at the ocean. I'm transitioning to head the Nebula Foundation instead, focusing our resources on environmental technology, sustainable innovation. Olivia struggled to process this information. When did you decide this? The process began 2 years ago after my hospitalization. But seeing you again accelerated everything. His eyes held hers steadily, not because of some romantic notion that it would win you back, but because you reminded me of who I wanted to be before ambition clouded everything. She studied his face, searching for any hint of the driven, relentless man who had once chosen career advancement over their relationship. Instead, she found something both familiar and new. The passionate intellect she'd first fallen for, now tempered with hard-earned wisdom. What happens now? She asked quietly. That depends, he replied, vulnerability evident in his voice. Professionally, Nebula Foundation will support Horizon Sanctuary regardless of anything else. Personally, he took a deep breath. I'd like to see if we could start again. Not from where we left off, we're different people now, but from who we are today. A harbor seal surfaced nearby, watching them curiously before disappearing beneath the waves. Olivia smiled at the timing, nature offering its own commentary. I've spent 6 years building walls, she admitted, convincing myself I was better alone than risking that kind of pain again. I understand if you can't trust me. That's just it, she interrupted. Yesterday, underwater, when everything was chaos and we could barely see, I trusted you completely, without even thinking about it. Hope illuminated his features, but he remained silent, waiting for her to continue. I'm not saying it would be easy, she cautioned. We've both created independent lives. My work will always demand everything I have. As it should, he affirmed. I'm not asking you to compromise your passion. I'm asking if there's room in your life for someone who wants to support that passion. Who wants to build something alongside you, not in competition? Olivia felt something shift inside her, like the ocean floor rearranging itself after a seismic event, creating new contours and possibilities. I think, she said slowly, that I'd like to find out. His smile rivaled the sunrise they'd watched earlier. Tentatively, he reached for her hand, and she allowed her fingers to intertwine with his. They continued walking, discussing practical matters, his relocation to the coast, her research schedule, the sanctuary expansion. The conversation flowed easily, two brilliant minds engaging as equals, occasionally punctuated by laughter or the rediscovery of shared references. Near a tidal pool teeming with life, James paused. "Remember what you taught me about ecosystems? How the strongest ones aren't dominated by a single species, but thrive through diversity and interdependence." Olivia nodded, already seeing where he was heading. "I think relationships work the same way," he continued. "Not one person sacrificing everything for the other, but two individuals bringing their strengths together, supporting each other through storms." "Very poetic for a tech executive," she teased gently. "Former tech executive," he corrected, eyes crinkling. "Current student of marine biology, among other subjects." As they reached the point where the trail circled back toward the sanctuary, Olivia stopped to watch a pair of pelicans soaring effortlessly on thermal currents. "It won't always be this easy," she warned. "Old patterns have a way of resurfacing." "Then we'll face them together," James replied. "With honesty and patience." He hesitated before adding, "I'm not asking for forever right now. Live just for today and maybe tomorrow, and we'll see where the current takes us." She considered his words, appreciating that he wasn't making grand promises or sweeping declarations. Instead, he offered something more valuable, the commitment to navigate whatever came, one day at a time. "I think I can manage that," she said softly. As they returned to the sanctuary, where her team was already coordinating storm recovery efforts, Olivia felt a sense of balance she hadn't experienced in years. The horizon before them stretched wide and open, filled with both challenges and possibilities. That evening, as sunset painted the sanctuary in golden light, James stood beside Olivia at the observation deck rail, watching researchers prepare for a night dive to check on the coral beds. Their shoulders touched lightly, a comfortable proximity that asked for nothing but offered everything. "Look," James pointed toward the water where a bioluminescent tide was beginning to form, tiny organisms creating ethereal blue patterns with their collective glow. "The ocean full of stars," Olivia murmured, remembering his words from years ago. He smiled, understanding the reference. "And worth every moment of study." As darkness settled around them, the luminescent waters mirrored the emerging stars above, two worlds reflecting each other in perfect symmetry. Just as the scientist and the visionary had found their own harmony, not by erasing their differences, but by recognizing how those very differences created something stronger together than either could build alone. They stood there long into the evening, two figures silhouetted against the glow of possibilities, charting a course through waters both familiar and new,